You're listening to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, just before, I'm conducting a survey of all our contributors today. Have you ever or do you watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette?
Never seen a single episode.
Wow. Okay. Nobody watches this. It's got 5 million viewers. Jim, earlier today...
Have you
yes.
ever asked yourself why you may be the only person who's watching this?
Well, as I said, 28 seasons ago when this first started, it was a television phenomenon, and we were kind of forced to watch it. It was required watching every week. That's my excuse. But I haven't watched it much in the last few years, so I'm just checking. All right, you and Brownstein never watch. All right, here's my question to you. Francois Legault today showed up to take questions from reporters with, of course, what you'd expect, an apple, an orange, and a banana. Brian, I believe, has the clip.
I like to eat
apples and bananas.
All right, that's the wrong clip there, Jim, but I think you know what we're talking about here. The question was on Northvolt and the fact that here's, a commercial and industrial development, not the same as a residential development, which had been turned down. Why? And here's what he really said.
What I was trying to say is that you cannot compare real estate development with an industrial development. If you talk about the environment, it's not the same project. So you cannot compare apple and oranges or bananas.
I'm sorry, I got to laugh at the end every time I hear it. So, look, this Northvolt story is not going away. It seems to be getting worse, not better.
Exactly, and I have to tell you, when you people are probably just tuning in right now saying, "What the hell are they doing on there with the apples and bananas?" This is the Premier of Quebec, folks. This is how he's explaining himself. I mean, let's take fruit out of the equation. Could someone tell me? And I know it can't be Francois Legault because he's trained as an accountant. He's not an urban expert. He isn't a biologist. Explain to me why you can't compare the two. They're going to take up space. They will be taking up real estate at the same spot. The real estate project was told, no, you can't do this. It's going to have too much of an effect on the environment, the wetlands areas, and so on. But then this entire element of the protection of the wetlands, the effect of the development, it's not that they say, oh no, it's not the same. The second report on Northvolt by the same ministry, the Ministry of the Environment, does not say, you can't compare apples and oranges. It doesn't mention the thing at all. There is no mention of the wetlands. None of the issues that were raised in the real estate report were raised with Northvolt, suggesting more and more that, how can I put it, something, perhaps the fix was in for this, that this was going to happen in hell or high water. It's not that crazy to suggest. Remember, Benoit Charette, our Minister of the Environment, during the infamous Third Link controversy, digging a tunnel under the St. Lawrence between Quebec City and Lévis. This is the Minister of Environment saying it doesn't matter what the environment reports say, this project is going through. So I think a lot of Quebecers have remembered that, but they're now seeing that Francois Legault is and of course the cartoonist had a field day when he started brandishing a banana, because now there are banana peels all over cartoons that deal with Legault and Northvolt. But the fact is, he's got no excuse for this. This thing is, the wheels are falling off of it. There have been other issues that were raised. I remember I discussed on the show with you, the Journal de Québec, tried to find out how many risk assessment reports had been done on the Northvolt project. In other words, to see, there was a lot of taxpayer money in there, close to $1 billion. How much risk are we letting ourselves in for? They had done all of one risk assessment report, which dealt with the market for cadmium. Everything else about what's happening at Northvolt, their product, this viability, nothing on that has been touched. There are so many loose ends, Aaron, so many unanswered questions that Francois Legault this weekend is going to have to go to his local supermarket and stock up on fruit, because the questions are not ending today. In fact, the Liberals, for crying out loud, the Quebec Liberals, it's as if somebody hit them with a defibrillator. They're all over this like drool on a baby. They are saying this is turning into a major crisis. You can see that they're kind of, readjusting their formation now, that they'll probably be focusing on this for the foreseeable future, as is everybody else, because when the Premier of Quebec, is resorting basically to fruits and legumes to explain government policy, you've got a problem. And Northvolt is a big, big problem for Francois Legault right now.
Fruits and legumes. All right. Jim, my next question happens to be with the budget, which we now know will be officially the provincial budget out March 12th. Eric Girard speaking today. So here's my question. The Premier has already said austerity is out of the question, doesn't want to use that word. We know that's a bad word in Quebec politics. He says, we can't cut taxes because we just paid teachers all this money, and we're not going to lose services, even though we do know there is going to be a substantial deficit. The finance minister, made that fairly clear today. Jim, what gets cut here? If all these don't get cut, what's left to cut?
Well, I know we're on the radio right now and people can't see what I'm doing, but trust me when I say at the moment, take a look at the banana I'm holding in my hands to explain what's going to happen with the budget. No, quite frankly, you've laid it out. Francois Legault, once again, has painted himself into a corner using his tongue as a brush. This will be a deficit-ridden budget, but taxes will not go up. There'll be no cuts. There'll be no austerity. In other words, I'm not even going to rip off the Band-Aid. I'm not going to put a Band-Aid on it. We're going to spend like nothing is going on, nothing to see here, folks, even though, despite Francois Legault's best hopes, we're facing a situation, a lot of economic uncertainty for Quebec's immediate future. We're talking about investments in health and education, even though we're not entirely sure what the final product is with these contract settlements. Yeah, we've been focusing on the money, but in terms of the conditions of work, will the system work? And indeed, will this attempt by the Legault government to completely centralize the operations of the healthcare system in a separate agency called Santé Québec, will that get off the ground? I have a sneaking suspicion that's going to cost us money as well, never mind public sector contracts. So in the end, we don't. It's terra incognita. There's nothing to stop them. They have a supermajority in the National Assembly, and we really don't know what's going to happen next. We really don't know when they bring down the budget next month what exactly is going to happen, or indeed if it's going to make any sense whatsoever. Because right now, just basing on the last 8 minutes of our conversation, Aaron, common sense does not seem to be in great supply at the National Assembly these days.
All right, so I want to just get to this last story. I know this is fairly recent. It turns out the mayor of Gatineau has decided to resign. And this is over, apparently, Jim, if I have this right, over death threats. She's not the first politician to walk away, and the thinking now is this is happening far too often. What kind of a signal is this sending?
Well, listen, this is kind of crazy, and believe me, when I first saw this story today, I remember this is France Belle-Île. She was the mayor of Gatineau. When we last heard of her, we talked about her on the show last fall when she walked up one side of Lionel Carmont, the social services minister, and down the other saying, I'm doing your job for you, Mr. Carmont. I have got all kinds of homeless people setting up camps in my town because you people can't put together a homeless policy. She really got a lot of focus. However, that said, Madame Belle-Île is one of the, and this is the astounding figure, one of the more than 740 elected officials, municipal officials, since 2021, past 3 years, who have resigned because, for whatever reason, the job is too much. As you say, the death threats, the whole 9 yards. I got to tell you, because, I remember sometimes I used to sit in the chair you're sitting in there, Aaron. I think it would be at some point, because we've had the conversation between you and me on air, I think it'd be a great question for our listeners to ask them, would you dare run for public office in this day and age? Because quite frankly, I'll tell you straight up, I wouldn't. I've seen what people have to put up with, and I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. People still do it, but we're seeing that it's taking a toll, and there's something very, very wrong, and just this side of sick when we're seeing literally hundreds of elected municipal officials saying, I can't do my job, I'm leaving, this is not what I signed up for, and far too many of them, just the harassment, the death threats, the things that I would venture to say even 10 years ago were never a part of this job are all of a sudden part of your daily bread. It's absolutely scandalous.
That was actually going to be my question at the end, Jim. So you said 10 years. Can you ever remember a time when these kinds of things happened 20, 30 years ago in politics?
No, never. And we can't just blame the internet. There's something has fractured in the public psyche as far as I'm concerned. I realize you've got the weirdos in their mom's basement who all of a sudden feel emboldened or whatever and are threatening people and doing whatever. But there's also this idea that all of a sudden Our elected officials aren't just someone; they're the enemy. They have to be, you're whatever you're doing. And can you imagine municipal officials getting death threats over policy? Geez, you must take the sewage system very seriously, my friend. It's like crazy. But there is a real ugly side emerging in Quebec, and not just Quebec, but I think in Western society. We're seeing that manifested against people, in many cases women, who have dared to run for public office, and we're paying the price. France Belleau said, I have to do this to protect my health and to protect my integrity. And I think in French, she means more just to keep myself together. I can no longer do this.
James MENNIE at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Demain.